The judge in this case said the actions of this one man were like that out of a horror film. Christina Prodan was 27 years old. She was in a relationship with Joseph Porter after meeting him on Facebook. He moved into her apartment in Minnesota in 2017. However, Joseph was not actually single when the pair got together. He was married to a man. It is reported that when the pair got together, Joseph and the man were either broken up or in an open relationship. Worryingly for Christina's family, there were red flags at the start of their relationship. Once he moved in, he became violent. Shockingly, he actually AR'd Christina at one point, and also massive trigger warning here for animals. He allegedly beat her dog and disturbingly was accused of killing a puppy back in his home in Arkansas. In December, not long after he moved in, Christina actually had to take out an order of protection against him. The pair broke up but ended up getting back together shortly after, because we all know that abusive relationships are really difficult to break free from. Christina's family knew about the violence that she was enduring, so they were very concerned when the pair had reunited. After not hearing from her daughter on January the 5th, 2018, Christina's mum was concerned. She rang police and asked that they do a welfare check. When police arrived at the scene, the place was an absolute mess, and Joseph and Christina were nowhere to be found. When police ran the details of Joseph's car through the system, they found out he'd actually been pulled over the night before. Eerily, Joseph was driving alone with a large suitcase in the car with him. Not only that, he had a pickaxe and a shovel. Christina remained missing. Days later, Joseph was spotted by police again. An officer found him sleeping in a car with burns all over his face. Police later would find out that this car he was sleeping in was stolen. During this time, police were obviously investigating Christina's disappearance. Interestingly, her phone had been turned on in the same area in Arkansas that Joseph was found sleeping. Her phone had been pawned at the local Walmart. CCTV showed Joseph going into that same store and he was arrested. He eventually confessed to killing Christina. He had brutally killed her by choking and beating her after an argument. He had tried to burn her body, hence the injuries to his face. Christina's remains were collected and Joseph pleaded guilty to unintentional murder. He got 20 years in prison. When neighbours spotted a 1-year-old wandering the streets of Michigan alone, alarm bells rang. However, they never expected the disturbing events that followed. It was December the 12th, 2016. A 1-year-old boy was spotted wandering around the corner of Plymouth Road and Warwick Street. Concerned neighbours rang the police and an alert was put out on local news. The child's granddad spotted the bulletin and rang police. He confirmed the child's identity and this set off a string of concerning events. 33-year-old Nicole Smith was the child's mum, and it became apparent she was nowhere to be found. She was soon reported missing. She was last seen the day prior on the corner of Long Acre and Chicago Street in Detroit. That day she was due to meet a family member at 5 p.m. but never turned up. The family member went to her house and she wasn't there. However, he did see footprints by the drive leading to where the car would have been, and he presumed she just popped out. Now, Nicole had 4 children and they were living in transitional housing prior to her disappearance. Worryingly, she told her friends the day before that she was due to meet a man that she'd met on Facebook. It was unclear whether this mystery man had anything to do with her vanishing, but her family just knew that it was very unusual for her to disappear without her kids. It would eventually be years before any light was shone on this case. Nicole's ex-boyfriend, Robert Autry, was found to be using Nicole's bridge card. Now, this is apparently a card that you can use to purchase food from certain shops. He was arrested and charged with Nicole's murder. However, frustratingly, police did not have enough evidence to convict him. Later though, Robert was actually charged on suspicion of SA. He actually confessed to killing Nicole at this point. He even told police where they could find her remains. He led police to an abandoned apartment in Detroit's west side. As expected, Nicole's body was found there. He pleaded guilty to her murder and will likely be behind bars for life. This man murdered his wife when she refused to go on a reality TV show. David Trons and Shanti Cooper Trons met on a dating site in 2013. When they met, he told her that he had inherited between $4 and $6 million from his dad. The pair, who lived in Orlando, ended up getting married just 1 year before her tragic death. In April 2018, David claimed that he found his wife deceased in the bath, covered in blood and partially submerged. He initially told emergency responders that his wife had slipped and fallen in the bath. However, the truth of what actually happened is sickening. The pair had been having arguments due to his finances. David had lied to Shanti about his supposed fortune and wanted her to appear on a home renovation show to get some house updates. The show was called Zombie House Flipping, and it was a show where contestants renovate properties into impressive homes. When his wife refused to take part, David was furious. The pair began sleeping apart. David was in the garage and Shanti was in a one-bedroom studio on the property. After David was ultimately exposed by Shanti for lying about his multi-million-dollar fortune, David saw a way out. He brutally strangled and beat his wife to death in the studio of their home. He tried to stage the scene to make it look like an accidental death. He told police that he had dragged her from the bathtub and carried her to the living room. Emergency responders, however, noted that the pair were both suspiciously dry when they arrived. A medical examiner concluded that her cause of death was blunt force trauma and strangulation. David was arrested and charged with her murder 4 months later. Tragically, Shanti had an 8-year-old son from a prior relationship who is now left without a mother. David was sentenced to life in prison. This teenager sent a disturbing text to her mum before going missing. What happened next is horrifying. Alicia Bell was just 18 years old when she left her mum's house to go to a relative's in Ohio. It was the 23rd of July, 2015. However, shortly after leaving the house, Alicia sent her mum a frantic text message. It said, "Mum, if I make it home, I need you, I'm scared." Understandably panicked, her mum then desperately tried to call her daughter. She called over and over, but worryingly the calls kept going to voicemail. Alicia never arrived at her relative's house and was never seen alive again. Alicia was reported missing and police got to work trying to figure out what had happened. However, initially they had no luck. That was until August when they raided the home of 40-year-old James Brooks. Initially, this was unrelated. They were actually raiding his home to try and find substances. It was at this point that they found a lot more than they bargained for. Horrifically, James had human remains in his garden in the burn pit. Police were suspicious that this may be the missing teenager. James actually knew her family, and incorrectly they thought he was harmless. He was arrested and charged with abuse of a corpse amongst many other unrelated charges. Forensics tragically confirmed the remains were that of Alicia. In May 2016, James was facing numerous charges relating to manslaughter, trafficking, abduction, and substance charges. Prosecutors believed that James was trafficking multiple girls, including Alicia, but the trafficking charges were for some reason dropped. He eventually pleaded guilty to all charges relating to Alicia's death. He was given 30 years in prison. Now, James is interestingly a person of interest in the disappearance of another missing girl. This is a girl from the same area called Jasmine Smith. She actually went missing a month before Alicia. Let me know if you'd like me to cover Jasmine's disappearance. This is the worrying disappearance of a girl who disappeared after her sister's graduation party. Jasmine Smith was 22 years old, living in Warren. On the 5th of June 2015, she travelled to Farrell in Pennsylvania to celebrate her sister's high school graduation. The trip was only around half an hour long, so her family were actually happy to wave her off after the event, knowing it wouldn't take long for her to get home. However, then 3 whole weeks would go by without them being able to get in contact with Jasmine. They reported the young woman missing to police, who disturbingly would hear news not long after of another girl, Alicia Bell, going missing. If you've not seen my video on the disappearance of Alicia, check it out, I've just posted it before this one. Essentially, Alicia, pictured above, went missing from the same area. Her remains were later found in a burn pit on the property of James Brooks. He was convicted of her murder. Jasmine's family fear that she may have become prey to this killer too. At the time of her disappearance, Jasmine was 5'7" and weighed 145 pounds. She's got several distinguishable tattoos, a heart and arrow near the corner of her eye on her upper cheek, and the word Bubby inside of a heart on her upper arm. Anyone with any information is urged to call police. This is how 2 true crime podcast fans helped a man wrongfully imprisoned for murder. It was June 2021, and married couple Harley and Michael Girk were spending many hours travelling in the car. To pass the time on their journeys, they were listening to true crime podcasts. Specifically, they started enjoying the Crime Junkie podcast. It was through this podcast that they actually were introduced to the case of the 1981 murder of Father Patrick Ryan. Father Patrick had been brutally murdered at a motel in Odessa. After listening to the podcast, they found out that a man named James Rios was convicted of the crime, but it was a controversial ruling. The evidence was extremely weak. James was an unemployed hitchhiker at the time of the murder. When the murder actually took place, James, who had befriended the priest, was in New Mexico. Now, James had seen the priest on the night in question, but when the man was murdered, James was out of town. He even had proof of this. He had petrol receipts and even a speeding fine. The killing went unsolved, but a year later, a drunk James, who was feeling extremely guilty for hitching a ride with the priest on the night in question, actually rang police. In his drunken state, he felt he was guilty for the murder for getting a ride with him. In his phone call with police, he confessed to feeling guilty for this. Although he recanted his statement when he sobered up, it was too late. He was convicted and sentenced to 38 years in prison. Luckily, Michael, who was listening to the podcast about this case, just so happened to be the son of the chief of police in Odessa. The couple decided to see how they could help. They got Michael's dad to reread the case file, and he agreed that there was not enough evidence for a conviction. Thanks to advancements in technology, fingerprints from the original crime scene were actually found to be matches of 3 men who had since passed away. No fingerprints of James were found at the scene. Now, James actually had been released from prison in 1995, but still had a murder conviction on his record. Thankfully, due to the 2 true crime fans, this was about to change. The Innocence Project of Texas got involved, and James was determined to be innocent. He will receive $80,000 in restitution for spending 24 years in prison. He told the press that it was the best day of his life. A TikToker faked having cancer in order to trick people out of money via a fundraising page. A TikToker from Iowa called Madison Russo was arrested in January this year after faking having pancreatic cancer. She did this in October 2022 when she was a university student. She claimed on social media that she had been diagnosed with the life-threatening condition. Initially, people believed her, but then medical professionals came forward to cast doubt over her claims. They stated that there were medical discrepancies in her story. Police then actually got involved and looked at her medical records, which confirmed that she had never been diagnosed with cancer. She was charged with theft by means of deception for using the fake illness to raise nearly $38,000 from kind donors online. She had set up a GoFundMe in order to obtain money and has now been ordered to pay restitution. She was recently given a 10-year suspended sentence, and the judge ordered her to pay the restitution and over $1,000 fine. She will also have to complete 100 hours of community service. The judge stated that she had taken part in a criminal scheme and that serious crimes must have serious consequences. The judge stated that she had deceived friends, family, her community, other cancer victims, charities, and strangers. There's another disturbing development in the case of the hundreds of bodies found rotting in a funeral home. If you haven't seen my previous video on this, the remains of nearly 200 people have been found at a funeral home in Penrose recently. The discovery was made after it was reported that there was an abhorrent smell coming from the building. The process has begun of identifying all of the bodies there, much to the distress of the loved ones. There are now some disturbing reports of worrying allegations. Now, many people were querying in the comment section of my original video on this case of how on earth did the families not know about this? Presumably, once a person receives a burial or a cremation, the family kind of knows what's happened to that person. They are either physically buried and the family can see that happening, or they receive the ashes. Now, a family member of one of the people who was being looked after by the funeral home believes that she was given fake ashes of her mother. The lady, reportedly named as Tanya Wilson, stated, "My mum's last wish was for her remains to be scattered in a place she loved, not rotting away in a building." Tanya and other families were allegedly given death certificates by the funeral home, which named crematoriums that had handled their loved ones. However, some reports state that the crematoriums didn't actually perform the cremations for the funeral home on the dates provided. A potential criminal investigation is still underway. This is a disturbing unsolved case of a man who vanished and then was found years later dead in a freezer in London. Roy Bigg was around 70 years old when he vanished in February 2012. It wasn't until 2021, when builders were working on the former Simpsons wine bar in Forest Gate, that he was discovered. Tragically, he was found deceased in a freezer in the basement of the property, and frustratingly, we have more questions than answers in this case. Roy was identified through dental records after being found on the 15th of October 2021. Interestingly, his cause of death was inconclusive. Police stated that he was likely in the freezer for several years, and despite it being over 2 years since he was found, police are still searching for information on his killer. The Metropolitan Police stated, although our investigation and previous media appeals have provided us with information about Roy's life, we still need your help in identifying who is responsible. So much of this case still remains a complete mystery, and a £20,000 reward is currently available for information leading to the arrest, charge and prosecution of those responsible. Anybody who does think that they may have even the tiniest bit of information is encouraged to contact the Metropolitan Police. Imagine finding a dead body at work and ignoring it because you think it's a plastic dummy. It was the 10th of October 2023. 34-year-old Robert Owen's body was found face down lying in a garden in North Carolina. Disturbingly, a groundskeeper actually found the body the day before, but thought that it was a plastic dummy and had been left there, so he just mowed around it. It was actually a construction worker who noticed that it was a dead body and reported it to the police on the day in question. Robert was seen alive by his family 2 days prior, and his sister Hayley is absolutely baffled by how anyone could mistake her deceased brother for a training dummy or Halloween decoration. Now, disturbingly, Robert's body was found with very little clothing on. However, police are stating that they are not suspecting foul play. Robert was known to take substances, but it's not yet been revealed whether or not this contributed to his death. When Robert's body was found, he was face down in his underwear and socks, with one arm under him and one arm out. He also had marks on his arms which are speculated to potentially be defensive wounds. He didn't have any of his property or belongings on him, which has left his family with a lot of unanswered questions. They've also expressed frustration at the fact that crime scene tape wasn't placed around the scene. They feel that the crime scene was not properly preserved. The family also stated that they were told that there was some broken glass around his body when he was found, but it's not clear where the glass came from. The family were initially told very little other than he had been shot. The autopsy was conducted and did not indicate an assault. A toxicology report is still pending to determine his cause of death. When this mother disappeared, it made no sense. When the truth came out, it was more horrific than anyone could have ever imagined. Christine Sheddy was 26 when she vanished. It was the 12th of November 2007, and Christine was a single mother. She loved her kids, enjoyed hanging out with her friends and helping with the family business. When she went missing, she was living in Maryland with her 2 children and 3 roommates. The roommates were 33-year-old Clarence Butch Jackson, his girlfriend 27 Tia Lynn Johnson, and his cousin 17-year-old Justin Haddle. Christine's disappearance went unsolved for years. That was until February 2010. Clarence had been arrested for arson. While in prison, he came clean to Christine's mum. He told Christine's mum that he would tell her where her daughter was buried if, in exchange, they would swap him to a prison where he was closer to his family. Clarence, Tia and Justin were subsequently charged for their part in Christine's murder. On the day that she died, Christine was at home with Clarence and Justin. Now, Christine was in a very awkward situation. She was actually in a love triangle with Clarence. As I mentioned, Clarence and Tia were dating, but Christine was also dating him. The relationship between them was physical, but Christine wanted to take it to the next level and be exclusive. Unfortunately for Christine, he turned her down. Desperate to try and get him to change his mind, she actually threatened that she would tell Tia about the pair of them if he didn't agree to be exclusive with her. Justin apparently overheard this conversation and said to Clarence, "You better finish her off." Justin then hit her over the head, crushing her skull. She'd been killed. When Tia came home that day, she actually noticed that Clarence and Justin were walking out of the woods. Little did Tia know they had just buried her roommate. They claimed Christine had just run away. It was only later that they eventually admitted what they'd done and asked Tia for her help. Shockingly, she agreed. They put Christine's body in Tia's car, where shockingly her 2 young children sat. They all drove to Snow Hill and dumped Christine's body by a B&B. Tia was sentenced to 15 years in prison, and Clarence and Justin both got life with. This is the disturbing case of the mistaken identity kidnapping. This case really does take wrong place, wrong time to the next level. On the evening of October the 13th, 2023, 2 brothers and their friend were sat in a car in Miami. The men were Jonathan and Jeffrey Arista and Raymond Gomez. They allegedly grabbed a victim outside of their apartment. One of the trio was dressed as a police officer and even had a gold badge and a police officer's vest. It's reported that they had fake police lights on their car. It's also reported that they forced the victim into the car and then blindfolded him. They then drove him to their Airbnb in Plantation in Miami without realising that they had the wrong man. Once at the Airbnb, they told the man that he owed them money. Shortly after this, though, they realised they had made the mistake. They had actually intended to kidnap their colleague, but decided to use this man anyway. They allegedly tortured him in the bathroom of the Airbnb before using him to lure in the actual intended target. Thinking fast, the victim actually called police to report a B threat in order to make sure police came quickly. This worked, and police sped to the scene at 2 a.m. on the 14th of October. Raymond reportedly tried to flee but ended up crashing his car nearby and hiding in a bush. Police ended up finding him a few hours later. Jonathan was caught by police and Jeffrey was also detained. Raymond admitted to police what they had done and stated that the motive was unpaid debts. The brothers and Raymond now face charges of kidnapping and conspiracy to kidnap. They could all get life in prison. This shocking case will put you off ever trick-or-treating again. Timothy O'Brien from Texas was just 8 years old on October the 31st, 1974. That evening, to celebrate Halloween, Timothy's dad Ronald took Timothy and his sister Elizabeth out trick-or-treating for the evening. Timothy's mum stayed at home while the trio went out that night. They visited one house, but the occupant didn't open the door. The 2 excited children ran on ahead to try another door while Ronald stayed behind. He reappeared shortly after and told his children that the owner of the house had opened the door and gave him some sweets. He showed the 2 children the pixie sticks that he had got from the owner. Once the trio had finished trick-or-treating, Ronald gave 3 other children the sweets in question and 1 each to both of his children. Before bed, Timothy tucked into the sweet that his dad had given him. Worryingly, he started saying that he had a really bad stomach and that the sweet tasted very bitter. The little boy started violently vomiting and convulsing. Tragically, he died on the way to hospital. Understandably, Timothy's death caused concern in the community. Who on earth would poison Halloween sweets? The autopsy revealed that Timothy had consumed a fatal dose of potassium cyanide. Local police started to gather up uneaten sweets from the local area. Luckily, this included the pixie sticks that Ronald had given to the children. It turned out that all 5 of the pixie sticks had been cut open and filled with the substance and resealed. One child even had a very narrow escape when they intended to eat the sweet but couldn't open the top. Police started to become suspicious of Ronald when they discovered that none of the houses that had trick-or-treaters that evening claimed to have given out pixie sticks. Ronald stuck with his story that these pixie sticks were from the house that they'd knocked originally and hadn't answered. He said a short time later, the lights were still off in the house and the door was cracked open just a tiny bit and a hand reached out and gave him the sweets. Now, the home in question, it was discovered, was actually owned by a professional air traffic controller who provided proof that he was at work at time of the trick-or-treating. Police then discovered that Ronald was in huge debt and his car was about to be repossessed. He'd also suspiciously taken out life insurance policies on his 2 children just months before Timothy's death. Ronald also callously called the life insurance company to make a claim just 1 day after Timothy had died. The nail in the coffin for Ronald was that police proved that he had visited a chemical supply store in Houston to buy cyanide just before Halloween. Ronald was found guilty of capital murder and 4 counts of attempted murder. His wife divorced him, and when she remarried, the new husband adopted Elizabeth. Ronald was given the death sentence and was executed in 1984. This news story involving a child is incredibly upsetting, so please be warned. A 5-year-old boy from Milwaukee was reported missing on the 25th of October. The boy, called Prince McCree, was living in the city's uptown neighborhood. His parents went door to door searching for their son the day he vanished. Police were told and they issued a critically missing alert to the media that evening. Tragically, the little boy was found at 9 a.m. the next day, deceased. Upsettingly, he was discovered in a bin. This was around a mile away from his home. His parents are reportedly understandably distraught. The child's cause of death is currently pending, but police have 2 people in custody. This is a 27-year-old man and a 15-year-old boy. It's not yet clear what the relationship is of the 2 people in custody to the child, if any. Prince is described by family members and friends as the sweetest boy. They stated he loved school and learning, he loved everything superheroes, and when he was very little he loved Baby Shark. The family have set up a GoFundMe to cover funeral costs for the child. This teacher is accused of adding a student on Snapchat and sending him something shocking. You won't believe what happened next. Ricky Lynn Lachlan is a 24-year-old teacher from Missouri. Police received a tip-off about an alleged inappropriate relationship between the teacher and a student. The student was just 16 years old, and Ricky allegedly sent extremely inappropriate videos and pictures of herself to the child. It's alleged that the behaviour then escalated to another level. She is accused of inviting the child to her home while her husband was away, but the child declined. The boy in question was interviewed by police and apparently stated that the teacher had added him on Snapchat. She then allegedly sent nude photos and videos to him. The boy told police that she requested photos back and he obliged. He stated that Ricky had warned him that she could go to prison for the actions, so to delete any photos and videos he had of her. Ricky claims that it was the student that began the conversation and that she had not been aware that he was a minor. Police seized her phone and found a video on there that matched the description of the video that the child had described. Ricky has since been arrested and charged with 6 felony S crimes. This woman sent a horrifying text message to members of her family and then vanished. What happened next left the family speechless. Tiara Lott was excited about life. It was January 2021 and she was 22 years old and about to start a new job. She lived in Buffalo, New York and was going to start working in IT after getting her GED. However, before she was about to embark on her promising new career, she vanished. Prior to going missing, Tiara had a 27-year-old boyfriend named Andre Wingham. She was spending a lot of time with him, much to the disapproval of her family and friends. They had noticed some things that really concerned them, none more so than the bruises they noticed on her face. Tiara had a final video call with a loved one on January the 29th. During the phone call, her concerned friend asked for her location so she could send an Uber to her. Disturbingly, the video chat then disconnected. Shortly after, Tiara sent a text to her loved ones that terrified them. It said, "God forbid if anything happens to me, that I love y'all and tell everybody." Tiara's family immediately reported this to police. It would be an agonizing 2-week wait until they heard any news. In the meantime, Tiara's family and friends went to a house on Gold Street where they had an idea that she may have been. Worryingly, they didn't find Tiara, but they found some of her belongings, including her ID. Tragically, on the 13th of February, police found Tiara's body. She was by railroad tracks on Wex Avenue. Her death was labelled a homicide. Andre was considered a person of interest, but he'd also vanished. That was until May 2022 when he handed himself in to authorities. He eventually accepted a plea deal and pleaded guilty to first-degree manslaughter. He was given 25 years in prison. This is how a pillowcase solved the mystery of the vanishing student. Brianna Dennison was just 19 years old when she vanished under mysterious circumstances on January the 20th, 2008, the evening before she'd been with a friend at a party in Nevada. They reportedly enjoyed their evening and then went back to the friend's home near the University of Nevada, Reno. When the friend woke up the next morning, however, they noticed something very, very concerning. Brianna was gone, and worryingly, there was a blood stain on the pillowcase for the pillow that she was using. The friend alerted police and a huge search began. It wasn't until weeks later that there was any news. Tragically, on February the 15th, a local man spotted Brianna deceased under some branches in a ditch. She'd been SA'd and strangled to death. This wasn't the first disturbing incident in the area. A string of SAs had been reported at the university. Forensics was able to prove that the blood-stained pillow linked Brianna's case to another SA in 2007. The race was on to find the perpetrator before another victim was taken. A public appeal was put out for anyone who may know the unidentified perpetrator. Then in November, a breakthrough. An anonymous tip came in stating the person to blame was James Biella. The tip stated that James behaved in a way that matched the behaviour of the reported suspect. James was taken in for questioning and suspiciously wouldn't give a DNA sample. However, James's girlfriend at the time did comply with police requests. She actually had a child with James, so she was able to provide James's DNA by providing the child's DNA. This was a positive match. The 2007 assault and Brianna's murder were both linked to James. He was arrested and charged with R-ing and killing Brianna, kidnapping and SAing another student, and R-ing another. He was convicted and sentenced to death. Tragically though, this is not the only horrific tragedy that this family would have to endure. Nearly 10 years later, the Dennison family had some more horrific news. Brianna's relative, Caitlin Dennison, was also 19 when she vanished on January the 15th, 2018. Please let me know if you would like me to cover Caitlin's case. When this family experienced their teenage loved one murdered, they thought it would be the last tragedy they would have to endure. 10 years later, another relative vanished. Brianna Dennison was just 19 when she was murdered. I will link her case to this video. Tragically for the Dennison family, 10 years later, on January the 10th, 2018, her relative Caitlin Dennison vanished. The teenager was from Reno in Nevada and was last known to be in Midland, Texas. She was last seen at Rick's Cabaret in Odessa and Walmart on Briarwood Drive. 6 months before vanishing, Caitlin had met a man who she began a relationship with. On the 9th of January 2018, Caitlin and the man in question took a flight. This was from Caitlin's hometown in Reno, Nevada to Texas together. Unfortunately, Caitlin's family do not know the man's name or a description of what he looked like. What we do know about Caitlin's movements is the day after she arrived in Texas, she reportedly called her sister from a Walmart in Midland. Concerningly, she said to her sister, "This man makes me scared for my life." As of right now, Caitlin has never spoken to her family again. They have never heard from her and never been able to get hold of her. The man that Caitlin was with has still never been identified. As little is known about the flight that the pair took together, it hasn't been possible to check CCTV from the airport. There is a $3,000 award for anyone who provides information leading to an arrest in this case. A 13-year-old is charged with doing the unimaginable to his mum. Irina Garcia was just 39 years old when she was killed in her sleep on the 12th of October. She'd given birth just weeks prior to the horrific incident. It's reported that her 13-year-old son called police to tell them he'd killed his mother. He reportedly told them that there was blood all over and asked for police to come. When he was asked for his address, he stated that he didn't know. Police rushed to the scene and arrested the child. He was reportedly very apologetic when they got there. They found his mother deceased next to the cot where her 2-week-old baby was sleeping. Luckily, the baby was unharmed. The 13-year-old will be tried as an adult on first-degree murder charges after the fatal stabbing of his mum. At his bond hearing, his dad and Nan begged for him to be released on house arrest. His dad described him as a humble and peaceful child. Professionals described the 13-year-old as sweet and respectful, reportedly very popular amongst staff at the detention centre. There is still no known motive and it remains a mystery what went on. There has been a mass shooting in Indianapolis at a Halloween party. Police received multiple phone calls about a large party after midnight on Sunday the 29th of October. When authorities responded to the scene to disperse the party, they heard gunshots. A large crowd started running from the area. Tragically, a 16-year-old girl was pronounced dead at the scene and 9 others were injured. The victims' ages are believed to be between 16 and 22 years old. All 9 survivors were rushed to local hospitals and are in a stable condition. Reportedly, the party had several hundred people and 6 firearms were found at the crime scene. The promoter of the party is believed to have been inviting people to attend via Snapchat and Cash App. Police are begging anyone with any information to come forward and help them with the investigation. The deputy stated no one deserves to die at 16 years old because they go to a party. They said, "We're going to do everything as a law enforcement agency to do our part, but we need you to do your part." Imagine starting to date a new guy, all is going well, and a month later he murders you with an ice pick. Katie Pham and Daniel Gunnarson had been dating for around a month. Prior to the tragic event, friends of the Californian pair had been growing in concern at Daniel's behaviour. It was reported he started showing animosity towards his 21-year-old girlfriend. It was the 18th of May 2021 and Daniel went to his stepdad's home in Ridgecrest. When he arrived, he confided in him around his failing relationship. He then called Katie and arranged to pick her up. He then drove her back to his dad's house. He led Katie to the garage where the unthinkable happened. It wasn't until painters arrived at the house that the horrific scene was discovered. Now, it's reported that the painters had actually heard a woman screaming, but it wasn't until an hour later that they opened the garage and found a hideous scene. They found Katie dead, partially unclothed and lying face down, and David covered in blood. Police were called and David was charged with murder. Evidence from the scene showed that David had put gloves on and used a 24-inch long ice axe to attack Katie. Once she was deceased, he SA'd her. He was given 25 years to life in prison, plus an additional 2 years and 4 months. Imagine a teacher at your middle school sending inappropriate pictures on Snapchat and abusing children. Cassidy Krause is a 24-year-old teacher from a school in Iowa. Despite her being listed on Facebook as being married after getting married in July, there are disturbing reports emerging. She was recently arrested and charged with abuse after sending obscene materials to a minor. It's believed that she sent inappropriate material to students via Snapchat and she has resigned from her role at the school. She's accused of SAing at least 3 students while employed by the school, the youngest student being just 13 years old. Court records show that her husband filed for divorce from her on the 28th of August. She currently faces up to 33 years in prison if convicted. It's reported that she has posted a $10,000 bond and has been released from jail for now. She is scheduled to return back to court on Thursday. She is yet to enter a plea. Imagine going on a school trip to a theme park and being killed after falling off a ride. On May the 9th, 2017, an 11-year-old schoolgirl was enjoying a trip to a theme park with other students. Eva Janath was on the Splash Canyon water ride at Drayton Manor Theme Park in Staffordshire. Splash Canyon is described as white water rapids. Guests travelled through the canyon on the circular rafts with waves crashing near to the boats. Part of the fun of the ride was being splashed with the water jets, and it featured fast-flowing sections and a long tunnel. Tragically for the schoolgirl, she ended up dying after she fell from the raft that she was on into the water beneath. She had tried to wade out of the water, but horrifically she was dragged under by the rapid water and suffered severe chest injuries. She was finally pulled out but was pronounced dead shortly after arriving at Birmingham Children's Hospital. She had been the first person to die at the theme park since 2004. The park was fined £1 million.